Hello, everybody. Thank you to be here today for the roundtable of this conference, Olympic Games and Global City Conference, set up by the Fondation France-Japon de l'École des Hautes Études en Sciences Sociales in Paris. We have this morning 3 presentations, and now we will have a roundtable with the stakeholder of the Games of Tokyo 2020 and 2 researchers that I will present after the opening remarks of Sébastien Lechevalier. You will have the possibility to send your question by the chat, or you will have the possibility to have the mic at the end of this roundtable if you have some question for the participant. I will now let the floor to Sébastien Lechevalier, Professor Sébastien Lechevalier from EHESS and President of the Fondation France-Japon. I let you the floor for the opening remarks. Thank you to be here.
Thank you very much, Alexandre, for this kind word and for this great organization. Warm welcome to all of you. My name is Sébastien Lechevalier. I'm the president of Fondation France-Japon, which is the main organizer of this 3 days event on Olympic Games and global cities. So I'm very pleased to be able to say a few words at the beginning of this roundtable and during this first day of an event that will welcome more than about 30 speakers and will be on 3 days, 2 days, November 13th and next week on December 7th and 8th. So I would like to thank all the participants, of course, audience. And today, I would like to have a special thanks to the 4 speakers of today's roundtable. The title is Tokyo and After, What is the Legacy of these exceptional games? So a warm thanks to Mr. Filippo Bignami, senior researcher at SUPSI. Warm thanks to Mr. Fumiaki Nakayasu, Senior Director of Games Delivery Office. Very warm welcome to my colleague and friend, Professor Oussouby Sacko, President of the Kyoto Seika University. And last but not least, I would like also to thank Mr. Mitsuru Yamashiro, member of the Tokyo Metropolitan government. Let me also thank all the partners that made this event possible. So this event is mainly organized by Fondation France-Japon based in Paris, but it could not have been possible to organize this event without the collaboration of Kyoto Seika University, without the collaboration of Maison de la Culture du Japon à Paris, Nihon Bunka Kaiken, and the collaboration of Campus Condorcet. I would like also to thank several sponsors. First of all, Toshiba International Foundation, Kei Machizukuri Zaidan, Maison des Sciences de l'Homme Paris Nord, and last but not least, Caisse des dépôts and consignation. So this event is really an event that gathers several researchers, stakeholders of Olympics in Tokyo, of course, but also in Paris, and a community of researchers and people who are interested in making this Olympic game in Tokyo and in Paris and beyond, of course, because many speakers will also talk about other events. It was the case just before this roundtable. The Fondation France-Japon, that I have the pleasure to, which I have the pleasure and the honor to be the president, was created more than 10 years ago. And the basic goal of this foundation is to establish a dialogue between Japan and France, between Japanese and Asian scholars and French and European scholars. We consider that the topic addressed in this roundtable and more generally in this 3 days event is of particular interest for this dialogue. To summarize, today this roundtable will be about the legacy of Tokyo Olympics, and so there are many dimensions of this legacy in Tokyo, in Japan, especially in a particularly difficult time. I'm sure it will be discussed, but please allow us to look forward, to look at Paris Olympic in 2024, and to try to draw some lessons from this Tokyo experience to make our Olympic Games in 2024 as successful as they have been in Tokyo. So this issue of legacy is, of course, a local legacy, but it's also a kind of transfer of knowledge, of experience. And I really hope today's speaker will be able to draw some lessons that can be transferred, learned, for the purpose of organizing wonderful Olympic Games in Paris. Let me end this short remarks in informing you that Fondation France-Japon and EHESS is now located on a brand new campus located at Aubervilliers. So it's a few minutes by walk to the site of the future Paris Olympic Games, and we feel that we are among the stakeholders of this Olympic Games, and I think we will, of course, continue to work hard to contribute at our level to the success of the Olympic Games. So I wish you a very nice discussion, and I would like now to give the floor again to Dr. Alexandre Faure, that I thank again for the great effort in putting together all these colleagues and stakeholders, and I wish you a very pleasant discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sébastien, for your words and for these openings. And we will be now for 1 hour in a roundtable about the Tokyo, and after what is the legacy of these exceptional games. I will have a few words in the beginning to have a context about what we will discuss today. And after, I will ask a 3 questions to all the 4 presentators. They will answer to this question, and we will finish by a discussion with the room. So I would like to start just to excuse Niccolo Cupini. So Niccolo Cupini was firstly in the roundtable, and is replaced at the last minute by Filippo Bignami. And thank you, Filippo, for your presence today. Niccolo Cupini was not able to come to the roundtable for an accident he have in the last weeks. So I hope he will be able to have a discussion with us in another occasion. I will now start by explaining perhaps why we decided to have this roundtable, and just in terms of context. So the TOCOG Games of 2020 was evidently one of the most important games during the last decades, because of the postponement we have in mind because of the pandemic of COVID. And I think it's not it's necessary to remember that this candidature come from a long processes for Tokyo. So the first candidature of the Games of Tokyo, as Masamichi Aihara explained to us, was for the Games of 2016. And the candidature happened in the end of the 2000s, since 2007, 2008, in a very, very different context of what we know today. So the first stone, we can say, for the Tokyo's Games come before the economic crisis of 2008, and in a context of huge competition between Tokyo and Beijing in a regional diplomacy. After the defeat of Tokyo for the election for 2016, Tokyo had a second candidature in 2011 after the earthquake of Tohoku and the catastrophe of Fukushima for the Games of 2020. And finally, this second candidature was the occasion for the the ancient governor of Tokyo to put Tokyo at the top of the national economy of Japan and to focus the national effort on Tokyo. And even if the catastrophe of Fukushima and Tohoku was not focused on this region. And finally, the election of Tokyo happened after the defeat and the dismiss of the ancient governor of Tokyo. So the initiator of the candidature of Tokyo was defeated politically before Tokyo was elected in 2013. And after the dismiss of Shintaro Ishihara in 2012, the national government and Shinzo Abe, the prime minister, decided to renationalize the question of the game. So we have a change of scale. It was really before 2012 the candidature of Tokyo, and after it became the candidature of Japan for the election of 2013. And now, so the games was prepared, the games was ready in the beginning of 2020, and we know what happened in March when the European countries started the lockdown. The IOC and the Tokyo Olympic Committee of Organization of the Games decided to postpone for the first time of the history of the Games, the Tokyo Games to 2021. And we know that is now another question for the game of Beijing in 3 or 4 months for the winter. We don't know what will happen for this game. So the crisis that Tokyo experienced 1 year and a half now ago is not finished. So we decided to have this roundtable to talk about the legacy of Tokyo, and not only about what we do after the games, but what was the preparation of the games, what was the challenge of Tokyo Games before the pandemic, during the pandemic, and now for the heritage of the games. So we will have for this roundtable 2 researchers, so Filippo Bignami from the SUPSI University and Oussouby Sacko, president and professor at the University of Kyoto Seika University, and also special advisor of the Expo 2025 in Osaka that we talked earlier this morning. And in terms of stakeholder, we are very pleased to welcome Fumiaki Nakayasu, Senior Director of Games Delivery Office at the TOCOG, and Mitsuru Yamashiro from the Tokyo Metropolitan Government. I will start with, I think, with the first question for Fumiaki Nakayasu. I will let him the possibility to put his slides for the presentation. So I stop my slides. And the first question is very simple. So after the election of Tokyo for the Games of 2013, what were the most important challenge for the Tokyo Olympic Committee in terms of urban development and transportation policy? Thank you to be here to answer to this question, and I let you the floor, Mr. Fumiaki Nakayasu.
First, thank you very much for the kind welcome, President Lechevalier, and thank you for a nice introduction, Alexandre Faure. And let me answer the question regarding the major efforts before the postponement. Next slide. So, in general, games preparation period can be divided into 2, before the postponement and after the postponement. And before the postponement, as you may know, that Tokyo 2020 was established in 2014, January 24th. And from 2014 to 2015, our largest challenge was venue change by utilizing existing venue to downsize the cost and the burden for the future generation. And this concept, we are not sure at the first place whether it is accepted by IOC or not, but it seems that IOC was in the similar situation. That's why they accepted our challenge. And after that, they announced Agenda 2020. The concept is kind of similar by utilizing the existing venues and reducing expense. Olympic and Paralympic will be celebrated by much more people. And the next challenge we faced was in 2016. It's an emblem issue. Our emblem, our first emblem was considered an imitation of a certain museum in Europe, Belgium, and we needed to withdraw the first one. And from that point, our organizing committee needed to focus more on transparency and open dialogue with national people. Major efforts before the postponement as operational in terms of operation or preparation, these are like engagement, transparency, and sustainability, and realizing symbiotic society, and reconstruction from the Great East Japan earthquake, which Alexandre mentioned in the first place. And it's general efforts we made in general. But next slide, please. If we jump to the transport and urban aspect, in regards to the traffic management, traffic demand management, traffic system management was a major issue to us. And regarding to the transportation, for us, there was no Olympic Park because we utilized a lot of existing venues. So that means that we had 45 venues and about 80 training venues and dozens of related facilities. And so establishing Olympic route network and transportation network was a big issue to us. And it is related to that, so that means that we needed a lot of buses and fleets. So securing free buses and fleets or securing drivers were also issue to us as well. And because it's a big event, it needs to be accessible buses and fleets as well. That was a challenge to us as well. In addition to that, from the urban aspects, at this moment, we were in the, how to say, a kind of happy time. So we are trying to, how to celebrate the Olympic and the Paralympic. So we generated the concept of Tokyo Waterfront City to have some celebrations in that area. Because we didn't have Olympic Park, we needed some kind of similar concept, and we replaced the concept with this idea. That was the major challenges we did before the post moment.
Thank you for this answer. Perhaps now we will have a question for Mitsuru Yamashiro from the Tokyo Metropolitan Government. How did the TMG, the Tokyo Metropolitan Government, make the Olympic urban project coherent with the long-term urban strategy? Did the game change the direction of the Tokyo Metropolitan Government took in the development of the Bay Area in particular, perhaps because the Bay Area is the most important part of the Tokyo Olympic project? So can you answer to this question, please? Thank you to be here. Mr. Yamashiro, you need to have your mic on.
Okay, sorry about that.
Yes. No, this is good. Thank you.
Okay, my name is Mitsuru Yamashiro, and I'm from the Tokyo Metropolitan Government. And this is a great opportunity for me because I work for the Olympic Games Tokyo 2020 both in the Tokyo government and also the Tokyo 2020 organizing committee. And also I'm dispatched from the Tokyo government right now. And now I live and work in Paris. So it's a great opportunity for in the double meaning. So let me explain a little bit about the TMG's long-term urban strategy and the relationship with the Olympic and the Paralympic plan. So in my opinion, I think the Olympic and the Paralympic project has been coherent with the long-term urban strategy of the Tokyo Metropolitan government from the beginning. TMG's venues and infrastructure development plan for the Olympics and the Paralympics has been always in line with its urban strategy, I think. And the development of the Bay Area, I hope you can all see the venue planning of the Tokyo 2020 Games. This is from the candidature file, and this is it's written in Japanese, but this area is a Bay Area, and what we are talking about right now. And the development of the Bay Area, which is eastern part of Tokyo, as you can see right now, has been one of the big issues in Tokyo for around 20 years. Tokyo's original plan was to develop the secondary city center in the Bay Area in order to mitigate traffic jams or high density of population and to solve other urban problems. However, the birth of the bubble economy in the late 90s brought a huge negative impact on the Bay Area project and slowed the development project down. As a result, the development of the Bay Area is a bit behind compared with other areas of Tokyo. So under such a situation, one of the TMG's plan, the Tokyo government's plan to accelerate the development of the Bay Area is MICE, meetings, incentives, conferences, and exhibitions. So Tokyo government has developed the necessary infrastructure such as convention center or international cruise terminal in the area and intend to invite large international conferences or expositions in order to boost the development of the Bay Area. So having Olympics and the Paralympics in this area is absolutely part of this plan and strategy. While we unfortunately lost against Rio de Janeiro for the 2016 Games, it was Tokyo's plan to hold the Olympics and the Paralympics Games in the Bay Area from the beach base for the 2016 Games. So the plan has been basically same since then and always in line with the long-term urban strategy of Tokyo. So from the viewpoint of the urban strategy, I think a key to success is to make Olympic and the Paralympic project part of long-term urban strategy. As Olympic and the Paralympic project is a huge and to be a national project in many cases, so it is a great opportunity for the host city to accelerate the urban development. However, the Olympics and the Paralympics are only one-month sport events. So if the venues and the infrastructures are built only for the games, they would not be utilized enough after the games and end up in just a huge waste of time and money. So in conclusion, Olympic and the Paralympic project should be aligned with the long-term urban strategy, just like the case of the Tokyo 2020 Games. So the Olympics and the Paralympics should not be a final goal or purpose, and they should be just an opportunity or tool to boost the long-term urban strategy. So that's all for me so far. So thank you for listening. And probably it's back to you, Mr. Faure.
Thank you for this first answer, and now I will give the floor to Professor Oussouby Sacko. Can you explain the importance of the Tokyo's bid for the Games of 2016 and 2020, as well as the Osaka's bid that you know more because you are part of the advisor of the World Expo in the conduct of urban policies in Japan? What is the importance of these candidature in general for the urban strategy in Japan? Thank you, Professor Sacko, to be here.
Okay, thank you. Can you maybe stop the sharing, or this sharing is from you, Alexandre?
Yes, please. Can you, Mitsuru, Yamashiro, to stop the share?
Yes, a little bit. Just a moment, please.
No problem, no problem. We have time.
I think it's done. I hope so.
So
Maybe a little bit, not yet.
yes,
Okay,
no,
now
Okay, thank you.
yes.
yes.
I'm sorry
Okay,
about that
No
again.
problem, no
okay.
problem.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. And also thank you, Professor Lechevalier and Alexandre Faure to give me the opportunity to talk here. And then I'm very sorry that we didn't have a lot of talk before, but I hope like I can satisfy your questions today. So as you said, so I think a lot of people talk already about like the urban impact of the games and also of the international gathering like Expo. So I was involved into the Olympic Games because I was supporting the Malian team to try to be ready for the Olympic. And then, as you say, I'm part of the, I'm now a special advisor for, senior advisor for the Expo. And at the same time, I'm part of the committee as a board member. So I think these two events, as Japan organized the Olympic before and also the Expo before, they try to minimize, like, I mean, the urban impact or like creating new urban facilities. So they try to use, you know, like, I mean, the existing facilities to try to make the game or make the Expo possible. So I think one thing was the discussion I had about that was like, I mean, how to, how to organize, you know, people daily life or commitment or commuting or all those things, coupling with the Olympic, because I think the Olympic doesn't change, you know, like, you know, people's habit, but at the same time, you know, I mean, they need a kind of different, you know, like, I mean, transportation, not or infrastructure system for the Olympic Games. So in that, I think the population were very worried about how much the Olympic will impact their daily life. Let me share very quickly, I mean, some pictures with you. So as I say, I was in the Olympic. Be there as much as possible to see. Same time, I was also doing some observations directly from the site, and then to see exactly, you know, how things was going on. So I tried to write a little bit about the Olympic after the Olympics, so about my opinion, you know, how this kind of Olympic impacts the places. So as you say, I think people came to the Olympic not to be only in the village. So that was also, you know, one of the contradictions Japanese people maybe may, you know, understand, because I think they came to the Olympic to be part of Tokyo, or to be part of Tokyo urban structure, actually. But the problem is, even if they were like, I mean, locked into the village, people were really in the urban area. They were going out, they were trying, for example, these people, you know, they were trying to go out to pray or to meet people or to do this kind of, you know, movement. So for me, you know, the population, the Japanese population was not well informed about how, you know, the population of the Olympic, people who come to the Olympic, they were like, I mean, expecting from Japan. That was the big question I had. So people who came to Japan, they were expecting to be among Japanese, to be with Japanese, and to be part of the Japanese, you know, like, I mean, urban structure. But they found themselves a little bit separated, but not exactly separated, because they were, I mean, going out at the same time. They had taxi, they had things. So, and then, so when you see that, so, you know, like that was, you know, the one part of contradiction I understand. So for me, this Olympic organization created a kind of like, urban contradiction. So even if it was for a short time, but I think people suffer from that because, for example, even if you take a taxi with the Olympic badge, people will say, oh, you shouldn't take this taxi. Maybe you have like you have to test corona, or you have to do this. So it was a kind of like, what I say, stigmatized. So people were stigmatized from the society, but they were feeling that they are part of the urban structure during that time. I think maybe we are now preparing the same thing for the Expo. So how Osaka and Kansai people will receive this Expo, not only exhibitors, but visitors for 6 months. So how those people will be part of the urban structure actually? So how do they will use the urban facilities? So I think the Olympic Games comes without any preparation of that kind. So that's the first remark I will have to do, but after I will try to talk. But for me, like I had much more impression about the understanding of like participants, and also how do they see Japan, or how do they talk to Japan. I will talk about that, but I think the Japanese society were not prepared yet to receive this new urban demand. And then there were a lot of like contradiction among what the government is planning, or what the Olympic is thinking, or what participants also were thinking. So that's for this time. I will stop here, and then maybe I will answer your questions later. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Sacko, and you will have more time just after to have more word about that. And I think it's very interesting because we can ask now from Filippo Bignami. So Filippo Bignami, you are a little bit you are not in Japan now, but you have studied the impact of mega events on some cities, and particularly taking care of the citizenship aspect that we told just now. At the light of the Tokyo experience, can you briefly explain the main implication on urban citizenship dimension are challenged in host city of mega events, so games as other mega events, and what is the singularity of the case of the pandemic in 2020 that can explain what happened in Tokyo and what Professor Sacko speak about?
So first, my greetings to everyone, and my thank you to Professor Lechevalier for the kind introduction, and also, of course, to you, Alexandre, for the kind invitation and sharing this very, very important and consistent roundtable, and also the whole conference is very, very exciting. So I need to say, I need to confirm, as you already anticipated, that I am here replacing my colleague Niccolò Cupini, which unfortunately is not available due to an accident. So probably my expertise is exactly shifted on the connection between mega events and let's say urban citizenship aspects. So first we have to say that I have been principal investigator in projects in observing the impacts of mega events in Tokyo, particularly in Rio de Janeiro. We followed in particular the wave of 10 years of mega events that have been staged in this city, and also Buenos Aires, and also other collaboration we had with other, of course, projects and scenarios. But basically, we have to say that we consider mega events not only, of course, Olympics or big sport events, but also all the events that imply a quite deep transformation of the urban settings. So among mega events are included also, for example, big political summits that might be, for example, the COP26 just staged in Glasgow, or also the Expo. Such kind of events that deeply, radically or not, but deeply impact the urban fabric. So said that, we need to say that in my perspective, in our perspective, in our view, using mega event as a sort of pretext, a reason, a tool for urban development is not, how to say, is not far or bad per se. So using mega events to develop and transform the city is also a powerful tool to change the city and improve the city. Rather is not so positive in our view, the opposite, because it would be wrong to have the requirements of a mega event, of a single mega event, dictate changes in a city and focus all efforts on a momentary occasion rather than the long-lasting changes of the urban conditions. Therefore, how to say, if one mega event is the only reason to make, for example, real estate deep changes, or to proceed in the deep infrastructure building or renovation, might let's say, peril to change the configuration of the urban aspect, not considering a long-term perspective, because we have not to neglect that mega event implies, as in case of Tokyo, as our colleagues beforehand said, implies years and years of planning and implementation. One, let's say, all in all, one short period of staging and of carrying out, and then a very long-lasting impact and legacy. So, without considering these three aspects, I think that one can lost some important details of and some important aspects of this change that implies what is the meaning of staging a mega event in an urban context, considering the citizenship. Considering the citizenship, why? Because I think that beyond the infrastructure, because for example, beyond the positive impact in transportation, as in the case of Tokyo, our colleague just said, we have to consider that there are also additional, let's say, allow me to say, techno-political aspects to be considered. Because, for example, I draw some note on that. For example, important, just to share with you very, very briefly, important aspects that link citizenship with mega events are, for example, participation. What happens, for example, in some neighborhoods, in some specific areas, when are so deeply changed and reoriented in their configuration and in their objective as urban space. So participation sometimes can be fostered and supported, but sometimes can be also hampered, impeded. Then there is, of course, the co-construction and say right to use the urban space, the public urban space. So this right, this possibility to co-construct the urban space sometimes is supported, but sometimes can also be hampered from mega events. Another aspect I will speed up because I don't want to take you too much time, is the access to services, because we have to consider that, for example, just one example, one trivial example, in the process of managing and in preparing and in setting up the preparation of a mega event, usually the urban governance is shifted on a sort of urgency, extra administrative regime. So the priorities of this urban area changes almost always quite deeply, shifting, for example, resources, shifting, for example, attention, shifting the delivery of services, shifting the delivery of entitlement and provision. So the access to service can be affected, deeply affected. Then we can enter later on in this discourse, but of course, always on the viewpoint of citizenship, can happen other phenomena, like for example zoning and lodging and the displacements. Or another important aspect is the acceleration of the use of platforms and the technologies, because of course also in the case of Tokyo, which is a quite excellent example of the pervasive use of technology. Of course, this can be seen as lights, but also as shadows in some cases, because of course the pervasive use of technologies, of platforms, can offer new opportunities, new services, new ways of co-construct a process, but also can offer a sort of use of data and use of technology as a repository, considering practically the individual as a data repository. So also on this aspect, we need to consider different direction and different crisscrossing of these aspects. So for the moment, I will stop because, of course, I take too much.
No problem. Thank you. We will have, I think, this point in a second part. It will be very interesting to come back to the question of the citizenship and the platform during the games. So perhaps now, if I can come back to Mitsuru Yamashiro, Mr. Mitsuru Yamashiro. So this postponement of the games, to come back to the question of the postponement, this postponement of the games is unprecedented, and as well as the experience of Tokyo is therefore unprecedented. So can you explain to us how the singular situation has modified the urban stakes that Tokyo Metropolitan government had to face, and how finally did the pandemic modify or not the urban ambition of Tokyo for the games? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Faure. I think the COVID-19 and the pandemic brought a huge impact on the operation of the Tokyo 2020 games. So Tokyo Metropolitan government had to solve various operational issues with the organizing committee and national government and other stakeholders. So for example, we had to decide if we could accept the spectators in the stadium, or we had to create special protocols and guidelines against the COVID-19. And also we had to figure out the countermeasures to protect athletes and the staffs and all the people involved in the games from the pandemic. So something like that. So since no one, including the IOC, had such an experience before to hold the Olympics and the Paralympics during the pandemic, it was extremely difficult and challenging work, of course. And on the other hand, a negative impact of the pandemic was very limited on the development of the venues and the infrastructures for the games, I think. Because if I remember correctly, the COVID-19 and the pandemic were emerged around December 2019 or January 2020, and that was after the development of the venues and the infrastructures. So it is necessary for the host city to hold test events at the same venues as the Olympics and the Paralympics 1 year prior to the actual games in order to check many things such as games operation. So these test events are very important and crucial, not only for the athletes, but also for the games organizer. So most of the venues and infrastructures were completed in 2019 for the test events, and that was before the pandemic. So I could say that we didn't have to change venues or infrastructure development plan due to the pandemic. But of course, it was still a huge loss of the great opportunity to showcase Tokyo and especially the Bay Area. Without COVID-19 and the pandemic, we could have welcomed spectators and sponsors and all the guests from all over the world, and we could have introduced the Bay Area, especially to the world for possible international meetings or conferences and expositions. So there should have been the various sponsored pavilions in the Bay Area, and a lot of people would have visited the area. But unfortunately, all the pavilions were canceled due to the pandemic and the national restrictions, and we lost a good business opportunity. So in this point, I totally agree with Professor Sacko mentioned a little bit earlier. So we lost a huge opportunity to welcome the people all over the world. And in addition, I have to admit that COVID-19 and the pandemic had still have a big negative impact on the long-term strategy of Tokyo to accelerate the urban development through the invitation of international meetings and the conferences. So we still have been facing difficulties to welcome international guests or tourism for tourism or business meetings and conferences, just like other countries and cities are facing right now. And especially the Japanese people are very sensitive to COVID-19, and the national government will not open the gate easily unless the global situation are dramatically improved, which seems extremely difficult with the new Omicron variant, unfortunately, these days. So to sum up, the damage of the COVID-19 and the pandemic was limited from the viewpoint of the venues and the infrastructure development for the Olympics and the Paralympics, I think. And however, the pandemic brings a huge negative impact on Tokyo's long-term urban strategy to invite international guests for tourism or business purposes and boost the urban development. And Tokyo tries to figure out a good solution, but it's not found yet, I think. So that's all for me right now. And the floor is back to you, Mr. Faure. Thank you.
Thank you for this answer. So now perhaps we can have a question for Fumiaki Nakayasu. So this situation is also a challenge in terms of the organization of the event itself, and not only for the urban aspect of the Tokyo Metropolitan government. So we had to rethink everything, especially in terms of welcoming the public, the athletes, the delegation. Can you explain the influence of the pandemic on the urban element of the organization of the games? How could the urban experiments take place or not? And I think about urban experiments, what was expected from some private partners like autonomous vehicle, hydrogen energy, multilingual reception, road traffic management you spoke at the beginning, and public transport you spoke also, but perhaps urban experiments from private partners in more general. Thank you, and you have the floor. Please, Mr. Can you put your mic? The mic is off.
Sorry.
Perfect.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. And I totally agree with Professor Sacko's point that people from abroad felt some contradiction. They came to Japan to see Japanese urban areas and Japanese cultures, but we could not provide them enough opportunity to experience those. That's a bit shame for us, but let me explain what we did when we welcome those people. This slide is the basic concept for COVID-19 countermeasures, which we provided with the cooperation of TMG and the national government. So we intentionally avoided using the word bubble because it is not the same bubble which was provided by NVA in the Florida. So instead, we used word like loop or limited destination. So our basic concept is, but anyway, the concept is kind of similar. Before entering the loop, we required negative certificates and health monitoring to secure the health of the overseas stakeholders. And after they enter the Japan, we required them to go through regular testing, limit the destination, and they will be suspended the participation card in case of violation of the rules. And by doing these restrictions, we tried to minimize the contact between the overseas stakeholders and the Japanese local people to secure the safety and health of both overseas stakeholders and Japanese local people. Those are the measures we took. It is quite natural for overseas people that they could not experience Japanese local cultures or urban areas. Next slide, please. And with this basic concept, after the postponement of the games, let me explain what happened to each specific operational areas. The overall traffic management, we did not have a big change. And regarding the transportation, the biggest change was we are not allowed, overseas stakeholders are not allowed to use the public transportation in the first 14 days. And that leads to the increase of the demand of buses and fleets. And we also needed a proper physical distance in those fleets. And that was quite challenging to us. And also to move to the far destination, we need airplane or bullet train, but the government required us to charter the whole airplane for such a movement. So that was challenging to us as well. And in terms of the urban activity, before the postponement, we are expecting some celebrational activities, but we need to minimize the activities. In addition to that, we need to change a lot of plans of operation after the postponement. First, we required foreign overseas spectators to submit the activity plan to limit the destination. Also, we required them frequent testing and other medical measures. And the operation at the international airport became very, very complicated to avoid the unnecessary contact with the general public and overseas spectators. And in addition to that, regarding the accommodation, we need to review our policy. We need to implement a new rule for the village stay to minimize the stay of athletes. And for other stakeholders, we need to consolidate the accommodations for the easier behavior control. With these efforts, we prepared, but unfortunately, state of emergency was declared from July 11th. So after that, we could not accept the spectators even inside Japan. Let me add some more words. Let me explain the result of our COVID-19 countermeasures. These was how to say quick notes for the results. No cases of clusters of COVID-19 was reported in Japan, and the positive test rate at the airport was quite low, and the positive rate of screening testing was quite low as well. We did over 1 million testing during the games time, which was quite huge, we think. And inpatients and accommodation facility users from overseas are also within the range of pre-estimates. So we think that our countermeasures worked as we planned. And let me add some words as well. Next slide, please. It may be too complicated, but so people say that during the games time, the movement of people, people said that movement of people may increase during the games time, but it was not true. During the games time, the movement of people decreased by about 30% to 40% from before the corona disaster, and decreased by about 10 and 20% 50% from before the tournament. And the next slide, please. Also, the number of effective reproductions of COVID-19 decreased start to decrease before the game's time. So from these results, we believe that our countermeasures worked and our games did not directly affect the increase of COVID-19 patients in Japan. So that was our measures and results. But yes, Mr. Sacko was right. It created some inconveniences, and we lost some opportunities, like Yamashiro-san said. Thank you.
Thank you for this explanation, and it was very interesting. And perhaps now, because you talk about Sacko, Professor Sacko, so the organization of the games was a great debate in Japan, and we see that the question of COVID was indeed important. So it was a great debate. How finally the maintaining of the event and the relative success of its organization were perceived in Japan, in Tokyo and outside Tokyo? What can these games teach us about the Japanese society and the reaction of the inhabitants of the cities in front of a disaster of this type, like the pandemic? Thank you.
Okay, let me share my slide. So as this word, that's really the key word, united by emotion. So, I mean, it can be positive, it can be negative, but there were, of course, like emotions in both sides. So I think before the games, there were like a kind of clear division between Japanese people. So people who supported the game, people who were against the game. So, and then there were, I mean, a lot of movement, you know, about that. So, you know, people were doing manifestation against the games, and even at the opening ceremony. But when the game started, so of course, you know, they were like, I mean, people start to understand that, you know, these people who come to compete or who come to support the athletes are not here to contaminate Japanese society. Because the contamination, as the explanation was done, the contamination was not coming from the Olympic Village, actually. That was the Japanese society itself, which doesn't contain, you know, like, I mean, the COVID-19 spread, but not from the Olympic Village. So if you can see here, so from the entrance of the village, so they were like a clear, like, I mean, so as they say, so they were not a clear bubble, but they were a kind of like clear division or separation of people. But what also impressed me, so if you can see here, so everyone coming into the village were checked somehow at some point. So that means like the anti-COVID movement, and also the COVID problem where the population were worried about was really without any problem. I think the support system was really very good in somehow. And also, if you go even to the restaurant, they were very strict about, like, I mean, how to operate actually. So all these things were here really to preserve that the village is not contaminating the urban structure or urban area. But the other problem is how these people, you know, I mean, goes into the city, as you say. So of course they prepare some cars for them, and then each country was attributed a car to go out or to do things or to connect places, because I mean the games were not in the village, so they have to go to the game place. They have to also sometimes, you know, walk a little distance. So that was also another thing. So what I found actually, so that's my own impression about the games. Let me make sure. My impression is high level of community consciousness among the players. I think the players, they really were like supporting each other. So it was like, I mean, so I come from Mali, or I come from Saudi Arabia. I mean, they were really supporting each other. So it's not about the sense of rivalry, but they support each other, not just competitors, as a kind of mutual aid relationship. And then being also one, regardless of the country, race. So that's really, like, I mean, keyword of diversity worked very well, I think, this time. And some, of course, people, they were less conscious of doing some problems, but everyone was so conscious that they have to make this game possible. and then that they don't have to really have problem with the games. So, and then one thing, what I mentioned in Japan about Japanese people, that was the ambiguous attitude of Japanese people. So if you take the ambiguous word is bad, but that was good in this time. That Japanese people were not very, very clear. You know, they were smiling. If you ask them, they smile, and you have to think yourself what to do. So that thing helped a lot of people, you know, to come to work themselves out. So there were not a lot of big demanding, actually. People were really working themselves. And also for the players, they don't want really to, that this Olympic Games are canceled, because I mean, it takes time to prepare, 5 years. And then for them, like this was a very big challenge. And one other thing, I think that's also the Tokyo Metropolitan also mentioned, that was also the volunteers. You know, there were a lot of contradiction. So there were a lot of volunteer registration, but after they canceled them and after they register. So that means the volunteers were not attributed at the right point. For example, the volunteer, what do you say, supporting Malian group, she can only speak English. And Japan and Malian group that don't speak English. So they have always to call me that I have to connect them. So they were like these kind of things. But as I say, as Japanese people were, you know, like, I mean, what do you say, ambiguous, and that was good. And then also, if you see what I see, so people work together. So the volunteers who work in the Olympic Village were also doing the hard. And then I was very surprised to see that even the self-defense forces members standing at the entrance all the time, you know, seeing people coming and going, they were always smiling. I don't think that that can happen in other countries. So they were not like here to control, but they were here, let's make this Olympic possible. So, and then little by little, outside people start to be concerned about the Olympic. So when you see the last, I mean, few days, people were around the village taking pictures, you know, wanted to see people. So, you know, that converts Tokyo people, you know, like, oh, okay, you see? So people were everywhere. We need to see Olympic. We need, so, you know, for the last week, it became a kind of tourist attraction from all over Japan. So that means, you know, I mean, what is it, the behavior of people into the village really support to make this Olympic a successful and example one. But and also this attitude of Japanese people saying we are collaborating, not we are here to control you. That also helped a lot, because I don't know if that happened in France or anywhere, or like the people say, okay, we control you guys, go to test, go to this. That will be, I mean, there will be a lot of fighting, but nobody fight with Japanese, you know, I mean, management actually. That was really something very great. So that's, as I say, like this Olympic was really a kind of like, I mean, the expression of Japanese mind. For example, even, I mean, the game without, you know, spectators, of course, that was difficult. But at the end, finally, you know, what are majority, minority, who are you? And then that's really bring all, you know, the players together to make it successful. So that's what we can learn from Japan, that the attitude of like a management, you know, as they say, all the manual were not completed actually. So, but somehow, you know, they succeed to treat case by case all the interventions. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Sacko, for this words. And if we can continue in this discussion, in this reflection, Mr. Filippo, Bignami, so how a mega event in general changed the life of the citizens before, during, and after the event? What is the role of mega event in the transformation of the public space and behavior in cities?
Thank you for the question. This question I will surely I handle in a quite short way, because it is quite precise, and allow me to say that, as I said before, the process of a mega event implementation needs to consider 3 steps: before, which is very long, during, which is very short, and after, which is very, very long and lasting. So usually in this process, is the main, or usually the main actor is a public-private partnership set up together with, for example, in the case of Olympics, but in other cases, other committees. But in the case of Olympic, the international Olympic committees, the national and urban governments and managing system or committees set up appositely for the organization of the event, and private companies. So one question that I think that it is very, very important to understand this way of functioning of this settlement of this private-public partnership. Do we think and are we sure that, for example, in the case of Olympics, the International Olympic Committee is so really interested in the long-term legacy? So this is a question that I raised to our kind guests, and with this question, I want to contend in some ways the fact that might happen that the International Olympic Committee is interested in, of course, exploiting and preparing the games before performing the games, but is not interested in the legacy. So might be wrong or might be right, but it's a question mark that I think that has to be welcomed. So for this reason, I think that of course in the city, as you asked, Alexandre, exactly originated from this preparation of the mega event. And due to this public-private partnership, are carried out and are implemented usually deep transformation. For example, as I mentioned before, aspects of changing the urban infrastructure, urban reshaping and transformation. There is, for example, the push of digital tools and platforms, as I mentioned. And also, usually the mega events are used as a showcase for the urban environment in which they happen. So another important aspect in terms also of citizenship is this narrative and these aspects of membership in terms of citizenship, because the narrative, of course, try to convey and to push the public opinion to welcome and to support the Olympics. So we have to consider these different aspects, of course. And then I think that another important aspect that we have to consider that in the cities happen, maybe in Tokyo less than in other, but is the fact that sometimes infrastructure are really, really not so useful legacy. For example, in Tokyo, seems that our friends from Tokyo are able to, let's say, include and exploit the infrastructure built for possible prospective use. But, for example, just to mention, the Porto Maravilla in Rio de Janeiro is I can say smoothly, it's a disaster. Because after the decade of mega events, now it's an area completely out of use, completely off. So it's a complete disaster from this point of view. So, this implied a displacement of people, some riots that happened, for example, in Rio de Janeiro. So another aspect that we have to consider in terms of citizenship impacts and in urban transformation is that mega events mega events sometimes risk to accelerate and deepen divides. The division between, for example, those who have access to resources and those who have not access to resources. For example, in case of migrants, maybe in Tokyo was not a big problem due to the rate of migration, but in other countries, in other urban settings, the divide between the migrant and the local people has been deeply exacerbated in some cases, also in terms of access to labor, workforce, really temporary workplaces to work on the, for example, on the mega event building yards and so on. So I think that, of course, these issues that I am raising and I am trying to share with you are often, how to say, maybe under-evaluated or somehow neglected. But I think that in a future agenda for the mega events, I think that needs to be more considered. Also because I think going towards a more concrete co-construction decision-making, or at least policy-making process has to be entertained, because now there is a greenwashing wave, let's say, but beyond this, there are also different aspects that I think deserve to be handled and raised to the political agenda in the urban areas where the mega events are staged.
Thank you for this this explanation. And perhaps if we talk about heritage, I can ask to Mr. Fumiaki Nakayasu, as a member of the Tokyo Games organizing committee, can you tell us what are the major legacy of Tokyo 2020 today? How do you think the experience of Tokyo will be useful and necessary for the realization of the Games of Paris and then Los Angeles, and in a near future? And I think it's another question very important for Beijing in few months. So what is the experience? What the experience of Tokyo can give to these cities that will be the next hosting cities for the games?
Thank you for giving the floor to me. And what Mr. Filippo-san mentioned truly touches important concept of Tokyo 2020, I believe. And as it is also, as Filippo-san mentioned, speaking about legacy might be too early for us because it is a very long journey. But anyway, let me explain some points that we consider the possible legacies. First, safe and secure games management. This is what we have provided to the world and to the future in Tokyo 2020 games, we believe. I explained some rules which participants must follow. We created a playbook, what is called a playbook, to let them know the detailed rules in visiting and participating the Tokyo Games. And this playbook method and major countermeasures were inherited to Beijing already. So this is the first legacy in short term, I believe. And bringing new value to sports was important to us as well. Tokyo was the game where the gender balance of the athletes participants was the best in the past history. I know that Paris will exceed this, but anyway, it was the best in the past history. And the urban new sports for young people were introduced. So by these, we believe that bringing new values to sports. And thirdly, I think this is the most important, but promote diversity, sustainability, and engagement. And Filippo-san said that participation and the co-construction process are important. And what we are trying to achieve in our preparation journey, I think our concept is quite matches with what Filippo-san said. let me explain some point. But since the start, we called ourselves Tokyo 20, not TOCOG, to show that we realize the importance of Paralympic. If we mention TOCOG, it means Olympic Game Organization Committee. So we avoided using that word in the first place to show the importance of diversity or Paralympic. Anyway, and sustainability was also important in a preparation period, in the whole preparation period, utilizing existing facilities, and we did some expense review, and we did some metal project of recycled metals, and we did some other programs as well. And engagement was also important. And we use the word engagement, but here the concept is the same with participation or co-construction, I believe. So after the emblem issue, we paid very much attention to this point. So we decided our mascot with the voting by elementary school kids, and we did some kind of similar activities as well. And transparency was also important. So it is also after the emblem issue, but we decided to reveal the result of almost all the procurement, and we try to show the roadmap in the preparation period to show to the world that when we decide important things, and we revised the playbook for 3 times. The first version was published in February, and the second version was in April, and the third version was in June. By doing so, we tried to have a dialogue with the general public to improve and explain what we are trying to do. And also, we tried to announce the number of COVID-19 positives daily during the game's time to show for the transparency. Also, we did some simplification and simplification of the games, and these can be the legacies for the future big events and other Olympic games, we believe. That's all from me. Thank you.
Thank you for those elements. And now, perhaps Mr. Mitsuru Yamashiro, for Tokyo, the games represent many works, construction, renovation, we understand that. But from the Tokyo Metropolitan's point of view, what are the main legacies of the games? After asking to the Tokyo Organizing Committee, we asked to the Tokyo government. So how did they transform the city and its governance and long-term direction, not only in terms of construction? What is the legacy of the games for the governance of the Tokyo region? And perhaps we can add the point we talked with Filippo Bignami and Oussouby Sacko. What is the legacy in terms of behavior for Tokyo Week? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Faure. Actually, I have similar ideas as Mr. Bignami and Mr. Nakayasu. The idea is about the legacy of the mega events like Olympics and the Paralympic Games, and the legacy have many aspects, and I'm totally agree with that. And recently, it is often said that there are 2 types of legacy: tangible legacy and intangible legacy. So I'd like to introduce you both the 2 kinds of legacy of Tokyo 2020. And first, as most of you could easily imagine or guess,
Mr. Yamashiro, please, can you put your mic closer to your? Your mic is not very easy to hear now.
Okay.
Yes.
I'm so sorry about that. Is it better?
I think it's better, but perhaps it's your mic here. Perhaps I don't know.
Probably this is better, I guess.
Yes, this is perfect. Thank you.
Okay, so sorry about that.
No problem.
Okay, and first, let me start with the venues and the infrastructures developed for the Olympics and the Paralympics as a tangible legacy. So in the case of the Tokyo 2020 Games, the new Olympic stadium and other new sport venues were built, of course. And also the rapid bus transit system was introduced and provide a new and important transportation services for local people. So this could be a good example of the tangible legacies of Tokyo 2020. However, it is of course difficult to leave tangible legacies in big matured cities like Tokyo or Paris. So because necessary infrastructures are already developed before the Olympics and the Paralympics games in general. So these days, improvement of the existing facilities and the infrastructures are one of the new approaches to leave tangible legacies, I think. So for example, the barrier-free or accessible designs were installed in train stations or hotels or other public facilities in Tokyo to host, especially the Paralympics games and welcome the athletes, Paralympic athletes and other stakeholders with impairment. So another example would be the installation of the green and eco technologies. For instance, the Tokyo government promotes zero emission buses and LED lighting and other eco-friendly technologies or facilities in order to realize a sustainable society after the games. So accessible designs or green technologies are both expected to be widely spread in Japan after the games, and that will be a good legacy of the Tokyo 2020 games, I think. And second, let me explain a little bit about intangible legacies. So intangible legacy is a totally different from the classic tangible legacy and relatively new concept, I think. And intangible legacy is about the people's way of thinking or lifestyle or maybe people's mind, as Professor Sacko explained a little bit earlier. So in the case of London 2012, for example, volunteerism and the green games or sustainability could be categorized as intangible legacies. So one of the intangible legacies of Tokyo 2020 will be better understanding of Paralympic athletes and the sports and better understanding of people with impairment. Under the game's vision of unity in diversity, Tokyo has been promoting Paralympic athletes and sports so that people could know better the people with impairment. And the final goal of this initiative is to realize inclusive society. So we really work on hard with the Tokyo organizing government, with the Tokyo organizing committee, like Mr. Nakayasu explained a little bit earlier. And another intangible legacy would be a new work style, such as remote work or telework. In order to mitigate the traffic jam in Tokyo during the games time, the Tokyo government promoted remote work or telework even before the pandemic. So unfortunately, most people would remember remote work or telework as what the pandemic that brought about, but it was actually one of the Tokyo's initiatives to change people's lifestyle after the games. So since it's been only a few months after the Tokyo 2020 games, so I totally agree with Mr. Nakayasu. It's still difficult and still too early to tell what is the legacy of Tokyo 2020 yet. However, it's absolutely sure that the Tokyo 2020 would leave various and important legacies and change our society. And in my opinion, intangible legacies such as an inclusive society or new work style are much more powerful than the simple venues and the infrastructures from the viewpoint of the impact on our society. So as Professor Sacko explained a little bit earlier, the mega events like Olympics and the Paralympics is a good opportunity to change people's mind or way of thinking, I think. So that's all from me. So thank you. And for it back to you, Mr. Faure.
Thank you. And I receive another question for you, Mitsuru Yamashiro. I receive another question in the chat directly for me, and I ask to you. So the question comes from Gustavo Lopez dos Santos. So the games have influenced the strategic planning of Tokyo, the Tokyo Vision 2020, up to a point that chapter 1 of the strategic plan was successful 2020 games. Because this type of strategic documents take time to develop, I want to ask if Tokyo 2016 and Tokyo 2020 have influenced the previously existing urban plans of the city and vice versa, where the event plan and the city's new urban plan developed simultaneously. how did they interacted? So the question is, because this kind of planification, Tokyo Vision 2020, is very long, do the candidature change the orientation of the plan, or the plan was totally integrated with the Tokyo Games? So what was for example, we can say that during the 2000s, the Bay Area was not developed as quickly as that we imagine. So did the games were implanted in the Bay Area to influence the development of this sector? Yes, perhaps it's a very general, perhaps I can let you have a reflection about that, and we can come back to you in a few minutes after a question to Filippo. Do you want to answer quickly, or do you want to have time? We can let you time if you want.
Yeah, that'd be great, because this is excellent question and I have to think well about that. So
okay,
yeah.
So I will have a question now for Oussouby Sacko, for Professor Oussouby Sacko, and we will come back to you for this question.
Okay,
so
thank you for your kindness.
Sacko, Osaka will host the World Expo in 2025. Do the pandemic of Tokyo Games have an influence of the organization of this next event? Have they modified the expectations, the ambitions, and the objectives of the city of Osaka and the organizer because of the pandemic? Thank you.
Okay, let me share some document, but I'm very sorry that it will be in Japanese. So I hope you understand.
No problem, no problem.
Okay. So if you see the beginning of the Osaka Expo and all these preparations. So it starts exactly, I think, the time, Tokyo Olympic was also under construction. And then also, of course, they influence each other. But you have to know that the Expo is a kind of like a national project. So it not concerns about only Osaka or Kansai, but it's also about the Japanese country. So, but somehow, if you see the process, of the preparation. So the pandemic started in 2019, and then also, that's really the time, the Expo documents were finalized. But of course, I think what was the big influence is, how to make a hybrid Expo. That's very important. People can participate online, and at the same time, they can come on site. And also, one reference was also the Dubai Expo, which is really very hybrid somehow. And also, all the ticket system, all the participation system, I think were influenced by the Tokyo. And also, if you see the theme, I think it's very important that, they have like three sub-teams. So of course, the theme itself, it's about life. It's about how people expect, for their life to be better in the future. But the sub-theme, the sub-themes, there are three: saving lives, empowering lives, and connecting lives. So if you see this, of course, the concept of people living lab is something like, it's a kind of like experimental thing, but people need to be on site. But at the same time, we have to really take care of those kind of sensibility, the impact of the COVID-19. But what saves, or what also is good in that, it's like the Olympic Village. So the site is really a little bit outside of the city, if you see. So, and somehow it can be very easy, isolated somehow, and also be prepared. That's, they can try to really, protect. But of course, as I say, COVID-19 is really in every single now decision. And also the other one was the SDGs. So of course, the SDGs is not really against, the COVID preparation, the COVID, anti-COVID measures. So that means all things go together. But in this time, so if I talk about the legacy, let me see. So, Japan tried to connect, all the, all the event which happened in Japan. So it started from the Olympic, the Tokyo Olympic, and then from the, excuse me, I have a, so, and then also the Expo in the 70, and also the Expo in 2005. And also all those games are part of the building of building the legacy of this Expo 2025. That means 2025 is based and also expired from all those events. So the legacy is very simple, what people say. So it's like, I mean, you come and feel, but you participate and let's do things together. That means like, it's not a kind of like Japan prepared Expo, people come to the Expo, but no, let's do this thing together. And then that can give us more sense to what they say, the life, and also to the future society. So it's very important to see that this Expo will be an Expo considering the impact of COVID-19 in our society, and also will get a lot of influence from the experience of the Olympic Games in Tokyo. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And before to have a last question for Filippo, I would have a question for you, Professor Sacko, and perhaps for the two colleagues from TMJ and TOCOG and Tokyo 2020. So we remarked that Osaka in 1970 and Tokyo in 1964 were two mega events organized in the land, so inside the land. And why now the games and the Osaka Expo are in the water, in the Bay Area, in the land reclamation? So this is a very different geographical orientation. I am geograph, it's why I ask that. But do you have an idea why the two periods was so different?
Yeah, I think the Olympic in '64 and also the Osaka Expo was part of the Japan urban development, actually. So Japan was urban, you know, like so that was kind of urbanization of Japanese big cities. So which include the transportation structure and also infrastructures and all those things. So, and also it was also to give people, you know, this confidence to bring to them those events, not to put the event out of them, you know. So that means like it was the opportunity at the same time to develop the urban structure, to develop the connection with people and all those urban structure. So I think this time the urban structure is good. So I think the point is to not disturb as much as possible the existing urban structure. So to have something which can cope with the actual urban structure, but at the same time, which is also supporting a kind of new extension of the cities. So I see, like, I mean, the Bay Area of Tokyo, the Bay Area of Osaka, a kind of like giving the opportunity of saying, okay, we will extend the city, you know, at that point. So that's my meaning. If I see, because I was asking a lot of questions, what will you do with this land after the Expo? So that means it's a kind of next extension of the Osaka Bay Area at the same time. So I think that's the point. So the development of urban structure in the 60s, 70s, and now to keep the urban structure and try to have an extension. That's my, explanation to that.
Thank you. Perhaps Mr. Nakayasu, you want to add something, or Mr. Yamashiro on this point? And
mine is a kind of personal opinion, but in Japanese history, because our land is very small, we have been doing land filling for not only decades, but for hundreds of years. So a new area is naturally be in the waterfront city area. It is a history of our country, I believe. It may be a too ambiguous comment, but it's my personal opinion. Yeah.
Thank you. So perhaps I will have the last question for Filippo Bignami. So because we are talking during this very uncertain time of pandemic, with the pandemic, this is not yet controlled, and we see that. What could be the consequence of the Tokyo Games on the organization of Paris and Los Angeles in terms of risk management and urban Olympic project? If you want, you can add, because I know you are not so firm, we can add the Milano Cortina Games for the winter, for the legacy of Tokyo in terms of transfer of knowledge and transfer of experience to other mega event hosts.
Yes, thank you, Alexander. Also, there is also Brisbane in the future, and also, but also the other expos, the other COPs. I mean, I think that I want to go straight to the point and to answer very in bullet point to your question. I would come back to the first consideration. I think that an important take home is to understand that an urban area cannot undergo and listen only to the requests of the mega events. In other way, it's I think that it's really important not to consider the mega event as the pretext to transform the city. This is, I think, my first point. Another point is that I think that in the case, for example, just to stay on the topic of the Olympics, I think that might be good that urban governments or countries that will host the Olympics should ask to the IOC, to International Olympic Committee, to change the contract in some way, because as we have seen in Tokyo 2020, despite around 70 or maybe something more of the population were contrary to the continuation of the Olympics, finally, the International Olympic Committee was the only that could decide to delay it or not. So the International Olympic Committee keeps the right to decide major amendments and also cancellation. And I think that this is not a process that can be continued, or in my opinion, of course. Then another point that I would raise and I would share with you might be important that the urban areas can decrease the exceptionality of the state in their government regimes in order to, let's say, not going out of the focus of other ordinary, let's say, process of government. So providing services, providing infrastructure, providing social services, providing welfare. And I think that it's important that mega events would not come and revert all the public management and governance processes. And then allow me just last point. I think that Nakayasu-san told important things in terms of enlarging and co-constructing the process, but I would say that might be also important to go beyond in perspective, because of the process is a long time-consuming pathway. I humbly think that might be useful to set up, together with maybe with the public-private partnership. I would deem that might be better to set up additional checks, maybe additional participatory tools, like additional, just to say, for example, like additional referenda, not just maybe asking in the beginning, do you want, for example, Olympics or not, to the dwellers of an urban area, but also providing them with additional moments where to check and where to share public decisions in order to, let's say, counterbalance or balance the top-down processes. For example, could be asked to the dwellers, to the citizens of an urban area, what to contribute and to agree a common, let's say, of course, common, but we understand what I mean, a democratic process in order to decide, for example, which kind of infrastructure have to be built and which will be their use after the Olympics. Consultations for neighborhood strategy, consultation for neighborhood developments, and for example, how to settle economic or social innovation in this area. I mean, increase the not only the initiatives in co-constructing, but the level of involvement in co-constructing.
Thank you for this explanation and this answer. I see that the time is running and it's 1 hour and 40 minutes we are doing that. So perhaps if I can let to Yamashiro-san some words to answer to the question we had last time, and after we will close the debate, and thank you to have participating to this debate. Dear Mitsuru Yamashiro, please.
Yes, I'm happy to. And thank you for the great, excellent question, Mr. Santos and Gustavo-san. And it's really hard to explain in a short time, but I think that TMZ, Tokyo government, has a long-term strategy before the bid for the 2016 games and the 2020 games. So I think in my understanding, the long-term strategy comes first, and Olympic Games and the Olympics plan comes later. So Tokyo government use the Olympics and the Paralympics to boost its long-term strategy. So that's my conclusion. But of course, as you expected, there's input and output between the two strategy or two plans. So for example, the Tokyo 2020 Games put new initiative to the existing long-term strategy of Tokyo government, such as promotion of the Paralympic athlete or Paralympic sports to realize the inclusive society. So I think the Tokyo 2020 Games modified or upgraded the long-term strategy of Tokyo government, I think. So of course, it's not an easy job and very complicated and integrated two plans or two strategies. So it was intersectional work within the Tokyo government, and it was somehow done under the leadership of the governors or other executives, I think. So yeah, that's all for me so far. So thank you.
So thank you to everybody. Thank you. So Mitsuru Yamashiro from the Tokyo Metropolitan Government. Thank you, Fumiaki Nakayasu from the TOCOG, and Filippo Bignami from SUPSI, and Oussouby Sacko from Kyoto Seika. Thank you to everybody to be here today. It was a very good time of discussion, and the time is running now. It's evening in Japan, so have a good evening and spend a good night after this discussion, and I hope we will have another time to discuss together of the Games of Tokyo. For the others from the Central European time visitors, we have the second session of the conference will start at 2 this afternoon, 2:15, with the presentation of Tomoko Tamari about the architectures in the case of Tokyo, and we will have a talk by Jessamine Abel from Pennsylvania University, State University, about the diplomacy of Tokyo, and we will finish by the bubble protocol. We start to talk today with Erez Golani Solomon and Christian Dimmer. Thank you to everybody, and see you this afternoon, or have a good evening. Bye.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.